The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers, an undercurrent of tension weaving through the air. Every seat was occupied, people packed shoulder to shoulder, their gazes fixed intently on the defendant's table. For weeks, the name James Carter had blazed across every headline, and now, here he was, the man at the center of it all. He was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and commanding in presence, dressed impeccably in a suit that likely cost more than many people's annual rent. James entered the room with a swagger that screamed arrogance, a slick smirk plastered across his face, his neatly combed back hair gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. It wasn't just a smile, it was a declaration, loud and clear, "I own this room." To those in attendance, though, it felt more like a slap in the face, a taunt. James Carter represented the kind of wealth that seemed untouchable. The kind that bought yachts, sprawling mansions on both coasts, and fleets of private jets. His company, Carter Investments, had once been heralded as a beacon of financial brilliance. Its glossy advertisements had promised prosperity, stability, and a brighter future. But lurking behind those polished campaigns was a sinister truth, one built on betrayal. James had preyed on trust. He'd sold hope, convincing hardworking families to pour everything into his schemes: retirement savings, college funds, even inheritances meant to secure futures. He dangled dreams in front of them, only to pull the rug out from under their feet. By the time the truth emerged, it was far too late. Their money?
Gone.
Homes?
Foreclosed.
Families?
Shattered.
Parents were forced to face their children with empty hands and broken promises. "We can't afford this anymore." For many, James's betrayal wasn't just about financial ruin. It tore at something deeper. It shattered faith in people, in the promise of a better tomorrow. When Judge Eleanor Kim entered the room, the whispers ceased instantly. Her presence alone commanded respect, radiating fairness and an unshakable sense of authority. Known for her unwavering commitment to justice, Judge Kim carried a reputation for being firm but just. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Kim," the bailiff announced with a booming voice. The entire room rose as one, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone's shoulders. Everyone, that is, except James Carter. He remained seated, flipping casually through his notepad, as if he were at a mundane business meeting instead of standing trial. His lawyer leaned in to murmur something, but James dismissed him with a wave of his hand, not even bothering to look up. Judge Kim reached her bench, her sharp gaze slicing through the room like glass. She didn't call out James for his blatant disrespect, not yet. But the tension in the room grew thick, suffocating, as the silence stretched. "You may be seated," Judge Kim said finally, her voice steady and commanding. With that, the trial began, and the weight of James Carter's actions came crashing down on the room. Angela Parker, a single mother of 3, sat in the front row, her face lined with exhaustion and heartbreak. She'd lost her home because of James Carter. Beside her was Tom Hayes, a retired firefighter who had spent his life saving others, only to lose his life savings to Carter Investments. Each victim's testimony was a gut-wrenching blow. Angela's voice trembled, and her hands shook as she recounted the moment she realized she couldn't make her mortgage payment. "I begged them not to take the house," she said, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. "But they didn't care. My kids and we slept in our car for 2 weeks. Do you know what it's like to look your children in the eye and tell them, 'We can't go home'?" Tom's testimony was equally devastating. "I spent 30 years running into burning buildings," he said, his voice heavy with suppressed anger. "And this man burned my future to the ground without even blinking." Through it all, James sat there unmoved. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone with an air of disinterest, occasionally leaning over to whisper to his lawyer. To him, the stories of these people, these lives he'd wrecked, were nothing but background noise. The prosecution brought forward damning evidence, emails where James had blatantly instructed his team to falsify documents. One email was read aloud, "Make the numbers look good. We need these suckers to sign." As the words echoed through the courtroom, a heavy silence fell. Angela shook her head in disbelief, tears silently trailing down her cheeks. Disbelief was etched on Tom's face as he clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, James smirked, unfazed by the mounting evidence against him. When asked to confirm the authenticity of the damning email, he leaned into the microphone with an air of arrogance that could fill the room. "Yes, I recognize it," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "But let's not pretend it means what you're implying. It's just business talk, something you wouldn't understand." A wave of gasps rippled through the courtroom, the shock palpable. Judge Kim's gavel struck down with a resounding bang, a thunderous command for order. "Order in the court," she declared, her voice sharp, her piercing gaze fixed on James. "Mr. Carter, I strongly advise you to watch your tone. This is a court of law, not a boardroom." But James remained undeterred, almost reveling in the chaos he created. He smirked again, rolled his eyes, and continued mocking the proceedings. He laughed at the prosecutor's questions as if they were jokes, whispered snide remarks to his lawyer, and exuded an air of contemptuous disregard for the gravity of the situation. The turning point, however, came during Angela Parker's testimony. Angela, a single mother whose life had been torn apart by James's schemes, approached the witness stand with trembling hands, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Her voice quivered as she began. "I trusted you," she said, the pain clear in her tone. "I trusted you with everything I had, and you destroyed my family." James didn't even look up. His attention was fixed on his phone, his detachment evident as he casually scrolled through his screen. The sight was too much for the prosecutor, who interrupted, pointing directly at James. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "the defendant is not paying attention to these proceedings." Judge Kim's expression remained calm, but her eyes burned with a fury that seemed to intensify the silence in the room. Her voice was icy as she addressed him. "Mr. Carter, put your phone away."
Now?
James glanced up lazily, his smirk still intact. "I'm checking something important," he said dismissively, holding up his phone as if it were a reasonable excuse. Judge Kim's tone did not waver. "I said now." For a moment, it seemed like James might argue, his defiance evident in the way he stared back at the judge. But, with a heavy sigh, he placed the phone down, the gesture laden with mock reluctance, as if he were granting her a favor. Angela continued her testimony, her voice heavy with emotion. "I don't understand how someone can be so heartless," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't understand how you can sit there and act like none of this matters." By the time the trial neared its conclusion, the evidence against James Carter was insurmountable. Emails, witness accounts, financial documents, each piece painted a damning picture of his greed and deceit. His lawyer attempted to spin the narrative, portraying James as misunderstood, but the truth was glaringly clear. When the verdict was delivered, it came swiftly, guilty on all counts. The day of sentencing saw the courtroom overflowing. Reporters elbowed each other for a better view. Victims gripped each other's hands for support, and James sat at the defense table, his signature smirk still plastered on his face. Judge Kim's voice was steady as she addressed him. "Mr. Carter, you have been found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and your behavior throughout this trial has been appalling. You have shown no remorse, no accountability, and no respect for this court or the people you've harmed." James's smirk wavered for the first time as the weight of her words settled in. "I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole," Judge Kim declared. Gasps filled the courtroom, the gravity of the sentence rippling through those present. Judge Kim wasn't done. "Furthermore," she continued, her voice unwavering, "I am ordering the liquidation of your assets to repay your victims. Every dollar you stole will be returned." James shot to his feet, his face red with anger. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice rising with desperation. "I'm James Carter. You can't treat me like this." Judge Kim's gavel slammed down once more, silencing the outburst. "This is my courtroom, Mr. Carter."
Sit down.
Defeated, James slumped back into his seat as officers moved to escort him out. As he was led away, the courtroom erupted into applause. Angela Parker pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming down her cheeks as relief washed over her. Beside her, Tom Hayes exhaled a shaky breath, his eyes glistening with emotion. Outside the courthouse, Angela spoke to reporters, her voice firm despite the tears. "No sentence can undo the damage," she said, "but at least now we have hope." For Judge Kim, the moment wasn't a victory. There was no triumph in punishment, only a quiet resolve. Justice wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. And for the first time, James Carter had no choice but to face it.